Привет всем, с вами я, Janie. I am on location here in front of St. John the Baptist Russian Orthodox Church in Washington, D.C., and it is the perfect setting for our video today, which is going to be about Old Russian, specifically Old Church Slavonic, and some of its remnants in modern Russian. So modern-day Russian has a lot of words that came from Древнерусский, ancient Russian, or Staroslavyansky, which is Old Church Slavonic. And in today's video, I'm going to tell you how you can identify whether something you're looking at is a Slavism or a Russism. So I first learned about these Slavisms, these words that kind of are of Old Church Slavonic influence. I first learned about them in my classes at Moscow State, but I want to take a minute to give a shout out to Mikita Alexeyev, one of my most favorite YouTubers, because he also did a video on this topic that was brilliantly done. And even though it doesn't have Russian subtitles, I am going to be taking some of the concepts from it and translating them into English so that you can understand them. And then also I'll link to his video down below. So, have you ever noticed that in the Slavic world there are a lot of cities that end in grad? For example, Belgrade, Serbia, Leningrad, Stalingrad, Volgograd. That grad means city. And it is the shortened version of город, and it's a perfect example of a Slavism. It's an example of a phenomenon in Russian called неполногласие, which means incomplete vowels, but I actually came up with a better term for it, and I'm going to call it vowel crunching, because in город you see two vowels, город, and it gets crunched down into grad. So anytime you see a word where there's a consonant followed by la, ra, or le, you're looking at a Slavism. It's an example of vowel crunching. So let's take a look at some examples more in depth. Zdarovye. There we see those two vowels. That's the Russism, and that means health. And the crunched version of it is actually a word you've been saying early on since you started learning Russian, which is zdravstvuyte. Zdravstvuyte. So you're literally saying, be healthy to someone when you're saying hello. You're telling them to be healthy. The next word is молодой. So take a guess what you think that's going to crunch down to. Think of the word for younger. It goes to младший, like this is my younger brother. Next is, we're going to go backwards now. This is the word млекопитающий, and it means a mammal. So now that you know that it has something to do with mammals, what do you see happening here that you think you could turn into a Russism? Okay, so the word that actually comes from is молоко, meaning milk. So that literally means milk feeding animals. And lastly, this is a cute little nickname that sometimes you'll see in like old books or children's stories, Zlatovlaski. So see if you can identify the two different words that got crunched down here. And we would translate this probably as Goldilocks. So this comes from the word zalato, meaning gold, and volosy, meaning hair. So golden hair. Something I find extremely fascinating that one of my professors in Moscow pointed out to me is that Slavisms tend to be more abstract, whereas the Russisms tend to be more concrete or pertaining to more everyday phenomena. So let's take a look at that more in depth. Okay, so here we're going to talk about some examples where the Russisms are about more concrete everyday objects, and then the Slavisms relate to more abstract terms. So for example, голова, something you can feel and touch, crunch those vowels down, and you get главный, which isn't as concrete. For example, that means the main, главная причина, the main reason. Next is the word for gate, varota, or this literally would mean gates. And what do gates do? They open and close, they turn in different directions. And the crunched down Slavism version of that is возвратить. So for example, this one means to return, meaning like to turn back, kind of. The next one, this one is very concrete, korotki. You could say this about a person, you could say this about your hair, meaning short. However, crunch the vowels down and you get a word like kratki, which also means short, but not about concrete things. Like it would be more about like a summary of something, brief. And then lastly is the word golos, which means your voice, and crunch those vowels down and we get glasny. So for example, when you've been saying I agree, я согласен, I am with voice. And then I really love this word because it has two Slavisms. Really, just an interesting fact. If you see един, meaning one, that's a Slavism. Один is the Russism and един is the Slavism. And then we have the Slavism right here with the crunched vowels. And this word translates as unanimously. So one voice, one voice. So another fascinating thing is that Ukrainian has taken on more of the Russisms. And this is because it tends to be more colloquial. It was historically more the language of the peasants. And so it didn't take on as much of the Old Church Slavonic as Russian did. So for example, the word for sweet in Russian is sladky. And now see if you can go backwards and guess the word for sweet in Ukrainian. Insert those vowels. Solodky, solodky. And another perfect example of this is the names of the president of Russia and the president of Ukrainian. Russian president is Vladimir Putin, and the Ukrainian president is Volodymyr Zelensky. Both of these names come from the word Vlad, meaning prince, and the Russian version got the vowel crunching, and the Ukrainian version kept with the Old Russian. And lastly are the prefixes period, pre, and pred, which looking at them you'd think those are 4 different prefixes, but they are actually the Slavic version and the Old Russian version of the same prefixes. So for example, in Russian, if you say period, then it means in front of or before. So for example, я сижу перед храмом. I am sitting in front of the cathedral. But then if you turn that into, if you do some vowel crunching on that and you turn it into a prefix, it's going to take on more of an abstract meaning, as these Old Church Slavonic words are wont to do. So for example, the word предсказать, meaning to foretell, предвкушать, to anticipate, and предотвратить, which there we have 2 Slavisms happening, the shortened version of перед, pred, and then varot, which we already talked about, turned into vrat, and this means to preempt something, so turn something away. All right, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching this video, and please leave your comments down below. What other words do you know that are Slavisms or Russisms? And then I'm very fascinated to know that if you speak a Slavic language, did your language tend to take on more Slavic, Old Church Slavonic words, or did it tend to take on more Rus words, like from Old Russian? So please leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Thank you so much for letting me ramble on about this. It's seriously one of my most favorite things to talk about. Хорошо, это все. До свидания.